lot of my leadership style, which I do today, is similar to how I was on the football team, is lifting the team up when it's not going right, teamwork, communication, digging deep, having grit, having resilience, all those key qualities that I had from football.
Welcome back to 40 Minute Mentor, the podcast on a mission to raise aspirations and inspire the next generation of category-defining founders, all in just 40 minutes. Today, we're joined by Murvah Iqbal, the co-founder and CEO of Hived, the UK's first customer-centric, tech-enabled and all-electric parcel delivery company designed for e-commerce. Murvah didn't always have her eyes set on disrupting the parcel delivery industry, but the entrepreneurial streak was always there. Before Hived, she captained Manchester City's youth team, headed up marketing for her family's fast food restaurant chain, Archie's, and turned unused van real estate into data-driven advertising with Vanbass Limited. In 2021, Murvah and her co-founder Matthias Krieger founded Hived, initially delivering parcels themselves by bike with a mission to build a truly sustainable, tech-driven logistics alternative. Fast forward to today, Hived operates a 100% electric fleet. The team have built their own AI routing and logistics stack, and they've raised over $42 million in a Series B round earlier this summer. But as with any challenger in a legacy industry, the journey is not always smooth. So in today's conversation, we'll explore Murvah's own leadership journey, the early days of Hived and how she scaled the business, and her perspective on the future of sustainable logistics. So Murvah, it's a wonderful pleasure and a privilege to have you on the podcast. I'm a big fan from a distance of the work you do at Hived, so can't wait to dig into your story and welcome you to the podcast. So thanks for being here. How are you?
Thanks. Good. Great for being here. And thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure. Well, we're going to warm you up with some quick fire questions just to get you started so our audience can get to know you a bit better. So please finish the following sentences after me. Number 1, the moment that defined my career was when?
I think when straight out of university, I declined a few consulting jobs. My parents weren't really happy about that, but I did it. And I think that was probably the career defining move, because I think if I went down that trajectory, I wouldn't have been entrepreneurial as I am today.
Well done. Good call. There's often a lot of pressure from families to take those sorts of gigs.
Definitely my family.
Yeah, it's so funny how many of our guests have had the same sort of pressure, and clearly this entrepreneurial spirit is that kind of rebel within is why we're here and why you built such a great business. The biggest lesson I've learned about leadership is?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned probably, and I'm still learning it, is trusting my gut a lot more. Often my gut has been right most of the times, and being an authentic leader. I think as a leader, you can you have this image of what a leader's supposed to be or should be, and more often than not, it's just be yourself, be authentic, and trust your gut. It's quite simple, but it's something actually that I'm reminded still today.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's especially in this day and age, all these people we're supposed to look up to and admire. And it's very easy for founders to want to try and replicate the style or the rhetoric you hear from others. But actually, at the end of the day, you just got to be yourself, I think people can see through it if you're not. A skill I wish I had mastered earlier in my career is?
I think being an A-star communicator. I'm still not A-star at all, but I think as you start to scale a team and grow, you realize the power of communication. And I think in the earlier part of Hived, I probably wasn't as clear and as good, and I'm still not anywhere where I want to be. And I think I've learned the power of really good, clear communication to your team, because the team is everything. And being able to communicate to them very clearly is a lot harder than one thinks. And it takes a lot of time, effort, and practice to actually master.
Yeah, very well said. Clarity of message, concise messages as well. I think it's so helpful, isn't it? It's so easy for things to get lost in translation or not land with teams. So that's something that comes up a lot on the podcast, and something I'm a constant work in progress on as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm already telling from now that you are clearly a brilliant communicator, but it's good that we're always trying to be better, right? If I could change one thing about how companies build teams, it would be?
I think I am trying to get this right at Hive, and it's still not something that we've got perfect. But I think as team scales, we bring in a lot of layers. Then it's really hard for different people to get their ideas forward, especially people who may be a bit more junior or on entry roles. But actually, their voice is so important because they are the ones on the ground, or they're often the ones seeing the problems. And Hive, we did an amazing job in the early stage where we had a very lean team of 20, 30, and everyone could say what was wrong or what need fixing. And I think as we scaled, we lost a little bit of that connection from a lot of people in different roles. And not having to be the most senior person in the room, not having to have go through all these layers to put your idea forward, to get your message across and to deliver results. I think that's something that I see in big corporations. It gets a bit stifled. And as Hived is scaling, I'm trying to make sure that that doesn't happen at Hived.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you for sharing. Well, we've warmed you up beautifully there, and I can't wait to dive into your career. We're going to start a place we don't often, which is football. And it's one of my favorite topics to talk about, and not normally on the podcast. We have had one professional footballer on the podcast before, but Stilian Petrov, my beloved Aston Villa former captain. But you were the captain of Manchester City's women's team from under nines all the way up to under 18s, which must be something you're incredibly proud of. So, can you share a bit for our listeners about your path from football to ultimately starting Hive? Like, where did this entrepreneurial sort of spark come from?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of parallels actually from being an athlete to being a leader. And I think I've actually only started to realize that in the past few years, that a lot of my leadership style, which I do today, is similar to how I was on the football team, is lifting the team up when it's not going right, teamwork, communication, digging deep, having grit, having resilience, all those key qualities that I had from football, I've tried to take to being a leader today. And it's not really a traditional career path for sure. I think I used to play football with my brother in my garden all the time. He was older than me. I wanted to be better than him. So he was my competition. And that just meant that I guess, who I was competing with day in, day out was 4 or 5 years older than me. And so from as early as I could walk, I started kicking a football, and I played football up until, yeah, I was 18. But alongside it wasn't just football. I was working on my family business. I had to do work really hard at school, so I was multitasking quite a lot of things. And I think that enabled me to, from a young age, really understand prioritization. And being a fast-paced founder, one of the key things that you have to absolutely learn to do is prioritization at lightning speed. And I think growing up from age 9 to 18, having to balance playing football, working in my family business, and ensuring that I got really good grades at school, that enabled me to, I think, yeah, have a high working performance mentality and prioritization, all these skills soft skills that I was learning that sometimes you don't learn through school or education. They're actually just pure life skills. And I took that I went to university, and I realized I always had an entrepreneurial streak in me, whether that's seeing my family around me have businesses. They didn't have, huge businesses growing up. My dad had a business, a small business. My uncle had a business that wasn't as, then it was successful, but now it's even more successful. So I had a lot around me to look up to think, actually, I find this really interesting, really fun, how you can start something from the ground up. But around me were all the males in my family had started businesses, and I was, had a bit of, maybe I was like, I can also do this. And so naturally, after university, like I said, I already mentioned before, but I got a few job offers in consulting, and I was probably going to go down that route. And then actually I realized, well, if I don't start a business now, when am I going to? And so just naturally happened. I don't think I set out to very, very clearly, like, I'm going to do it at this age, go to that age. Life just happened. It just fell into place for me. And I'm incredibly grateful that I didn't overthink things at any stage in time. I just, well, what's the worst that can happen? And that's something that I live by even today. What's the worst that can happen? If I fail, I'll learn from it, and I'll go again, I'm sure. And I can always go back to the consulting job later.
Yeah, it's a great mentality, and does not surprise me. From the early football grounding, that kind of high achieving, yeah, attitude and approach has clearly, carried through to where you are today. So, tell our audience, if you don't mind, where did the idea for Hive come from, and how did it all begin?
Yeah, I think with all businesses, I never, to be honest, thought I would ever build a logistics company. Never. And still to this day, I'm a bit confused as to how I ended up in logistics. But it was truly, I went to San Francisco on my second year of university, and sort of like a university organized trip to Silicon Valley. And that was hugely eye opening for me, because Prior to that, I had known a lot about business, but very small businesses growing year after year, very slowly and profitable, like sort of the SME way, which is, of course, a great avenue to go down as well. But going to Silicon Valley opened my eyes in terms of how you can build a category defining business. If you build a huge billion-dollar company in a very short space amount of time. I was visiting companies like Tesla, etc., and that was like inspiring. And so going to Silicon Valley opened my eyes out. And after university, actually, I was lucky enough to meet my co-founder Matthias on that trip. After university, I realized I want to start a business. Had no idea what to do, and just started lots of different things, threw anything at the wall. Some of it, of course, didn't stick. Some of it I just did to make a bit of money and hustle through. And then eventually with Matthias, we landed on one business idea that sold advertising space on parcel delivery vans. In a similar way that you see advertising on tubes and taxis, we thought all this prime real estate of white delivery vans driving in densely populated areas, why don't we apply advertising on them? And then we installed GPS trackers inside of majority of delivery vans in London, or extracted the data to understand where these delivery vehicles were driving to apply the correct advertising on them. And we did this for about 8 months to a year. And then a few things became apparent. Firstly, that outdoor advertising was on the decline and it wasn't going to be a big, massive billion-dollar company that we wanted to build. And there wasn't really a technology angle that you could really build here. But secondly, we realized and discovered how massive parcel delivery logistics is as part of the economy, how big e-commerce is. E-commerce is 10% of UK GDP, and parcel delivery tracks that. And then how massive these logistics incumbent companies are and how profitable they are, but also how bad the delivery experience is, both from a shipper, if you're actually using these companies, and from a recipient experience. And it just didn't feel right. And we were thinking about this, day in, day out. We were looking at all this data. The routing didn't make sense. We could see there was no technology. And so maybe naively or maybe brilliantly, we just thought, actually, should we just build a parcel delivery company? It literally just started like that. And we just changed. And from my flat, we just said, okay, well, let's just start. How do you start? By getting your first customers. Went onto LinkedIn, messaged a few people who had small Shopifys and said, hey, look, are you after a better delivery experience? And everyone was like, yes, please, please. And then Matthias built the first version of the platform. I got the first few customers, and we both won our bikes delivering parcels. And I think the best way to do something is just start. And that was in sort of 2021, and we've never really looked back since. And I guess, we validated that was a massive problem, massive area, massive TAM, and market size growing as well massively. E-commerce is still continuing to grow, and low technology. And we thought, well, this is definitely a market for disruption.
Amazing. What a great call you made. And I'm sure that everyone listening to this can remember many a time where they've had a terrible experience. So such a great idea, and seems so obvious now, but just so brilliant to have come up with it and then just got on with it. Before we come on to talking about the journey you've been on, the co-founder dynamic is something I find very fascinating, mainly because I was a bootstrap founder, solo founder for 12 years. And I often felt how much I'd love to have had a co-founder. And I now have that since our business got acquired, and can really see the benefit. But tell us a bit about your dynamic as co-founders, and how do you both kind of complement each other's skills and experiences?
I don't know how I would have done this journey without a co-founder. So credit to you for doing it for so long as a solo founder.
It's lonely.
Yeah, for sure. I think co-founder success is one of the main reasons why startup works or inevitably fails. And I think for a good co-founder relationship, you have to have deep trust between you both. And thankfully, Matthias and I do have that, and complementary skill sets. Matthias is an extraordinary person who's in the details and knows everything about the business and can put it all together, and is a moonshot business idea thinker and will come up with 10 crazy ideas. Two are absolute genius, eight you're like, what the hell? But that's what makes him brilliant, because he can come up with those two incredible ideas that not many people can. And he's very technical, very into the details, knows how everything needs to be. I, on the other hand, is very, very much, my leadership style is completely different. I'm much more commercial. So I'm very commercially minded. I spend a lot of time with our customers. I think more about the team, the strategy, the 6 months plan, the 5-year plan, how that all relates to today. And we both are very complementary in that, because all the stuff that I do, Matthias absolutely hates, dealing with, fundraising, investors, board packs. all of that stuff. And the stuff that Matthias does, I'm happy he's doing it. But because we have this great level of deep trust between each other, we both feel very comfortable to challenge each other's opinions in a healthy, constructive way, and ultimately come to the right decision and work together. And we've been doing this for quite a while. We've been working together pre-Hived as well. That gave us a good, I guess, test bed if this is working. And as we've evolved our leadership styles, it's continuing to get even stronger and stronger.
Love that. What a great team. And I'm sure our audience would be kind of itching to know how you went from kind of going on bikes, delivering things as the two of you to where you are today. So can you talk about how the offering has evolved and who your like typical customers are?
Firstly, I think it all comes down to having the belief, and I say this to everyone, is I was on my bike for 6 months delivering parcels from my flat, and I have lots of images and painful videos to show this, but I never once doubted that we would become a $1 billion company, and we're far from that, but I still have that same vision and belief. And I think that's what gets you through this, is having being a little bit crazy, right? When you're delivering some parcels on your bikes to being, nope, nope, we're going to do this in 10 years or whatever, we're going to be this big, we're going to dominate the UK. And so I think having such strong belief and almost like manifesting what you want to happen is a really key part in all of this. So I think that, and having the confidence and belief, gets you half the way there, to be completely honest. And then second is just never accepting failure or taking no for an answer, and always finding a solution to a problem. We've had so many instances at the start where it's like, yeah, we're delivering parcels, like, how do you escape that? And when you're in some momentum, when you get the first customer, second customer, flywheel starts to happen, and that momentum doesn't slow down. And I think that's all we've been doing. And even today, I've not really had time to really stop and pause and think, well, what happened? But it's only been just over 4 years. And from delivering parcels on my bike to now we're delivering millions and millions of parcels for some of the biggest customers globally. And we're going to continue to do so next year and the year after. So I think it's just having the belief, and tactically just having a clear idea of, okay, what next year looks like, and what today looks like, and what tomorrow looks like, and how you have to constantly go, go, go. And truthfully, a lot of hard work. I'm not going to deny that.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's something that is, there's no point denying, because otherwise we set the wrong expectations for people that are thinking about careers in entrepreneurship. There's no point hiding. It's brutal at times. And, you cannot build a big business unless you work incredibly hard and get people along the journey that are also willing to kind of commit to that way of doing things. So clearly the business has evolved to like considerably, but that's not without challenge, right? When you're disrupting particularly a huge legacy industry like you're doing, you're going to have difficult times. So how did you start to build that early traction? What were some of the biggest pushbacks you had from your early customers? And what were the learnings and things you had to do to overcome them?
I think the first thing is obviously getting the first few customers is always the hardest thing. And we had a target in mind that we wanted to get our first enterprise customer, but how we couldn't knock on the doors of a Zara or ASOS or a John Lewis, like the customers that we're working with now, right? When it's just me and my bike delivering parcels. So we had to establish a bit of a reputation, a bit of a brand, a bit of a name. And the way that we could do that was by onboarding a lot of the smaller customers and more and get slightly bigger, but fundamentally is making sure that the product does the talking. And so when customers are experienced the Hived service, that's the proof in the pudding. I don't have to do much selling. Then all I can say to them is actually order from one of our early customers, let's say Minor Figures, as a quite famous milk brand, one of our smaller, bigger customers at the start, but like order from them and see the experience for yourself. And so I guess the main thing that I always say to founders or people who are trying to build enterprise sales or is just focus on building a great product. And that in itself will do a lot of the selling and talking. So it's really having a clear mind and clear strategy and clear vision of, okay, who are my top tier customers? Who do I want to go after? And what's the strategy to get to them? And it's like getting smaller customers, going up the ladder, making sure the product does really well, being very persistent, being in their inboxes constantly, being at the right events, getting the right industry people, also hiring people who have worked at these companies before. Lots of different tactics that you can deploy, but the first enterprise customer is always the hardest. The smaller customers for us were a little bit easier to get going, but the first enterprise customer, I think, took about from when we launched in 2021, end of 2022, we went live with our first enterprise customer, and then it's been a flywheel. So it's staying pretty persistent, but just ensuring that you're building a phenomenal product that they just can't turn down.
Yeah, I love that. Persistent is such a great word for it. I always talk about being politely persistent. I think it's really important to kind of keep that going, keep that drumbeat, and not letting the knockbacks set you off the mission, which clearly from day one has been huge. And you're well on the path, which is super exciting. And now you work with all these incredible brands like big enterprise retail clients and get lots of incredible feedback. So, yeah, kudos to you for what you've achieved on that front. I guess thinking about the when you go back in time, if you were to have a time machine to go back in time to one moment that you could do things differently, could you give me an example of what you would choose?
Loads. I mean, I've made so many mistakes along the way, but funny enough, I wouldn't change any of it because every mistake has taught me a massive lesson. And so if I didn't make that mistake, I wouldn't have learned that lesson and I wouldn't have adapted and evolved. So every failure, everything, every setback, every challenge I've taken in my stride. And it also now allows me to take any future challenge or setback a lot easier because I love it. Now I'm like, great, what am I going to learn from this? So that my mindset has changed. So
It's a refreshing take.
yeah, so many times. But I look back and the way I think about it, Hive wouldn't be here today if we hadn't gone through all those mistakes, challenges, etc. I think we were probably growing a bit too fast in 2022, 2023. That meant we had to, like for a couple of days, our service and quality wasn't where it wanted to be. And that was a huge lesson for me to learn actually growing too fast isn't always a great thing and like understanding what a growth throttle should be. So there's been painful experiences where, in Christmas 2022, we onboarded our first enterprise customer, then quickly our second and third, all within the space of a few weeks when it was coming up to Black Friday, Christmas peak. The Royal Mail strikes were happening. It was snowing. I was in the warehouse, me and my co-founder, doing 20-hour days for 2 weeks consecutively, sleeping 4 hours a day, just eating Domino's pizza. But yeah, I hated it. I still probably have PTSD from that, but we learned so much from that, came back fresh into the new year with all the learnings that we take from that. And that enabled us to have a really strong 2023 and change perspective on a lot of things. So, like I said, so many challenges that we've had, so many failures that I personally had. I've made lots of different wrong hires. That's part of the journey, and you learn from that. And I've changed myself as a leader. I've made some bad calls as a leader before. But like I said, you don't learn by not making mistakes. And I think that's one of the key things where I think a lot of British people have a hard time with is failing. And I think failing is incredible as long as you learn from it and change from it and don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, really well said. And clearly those learnings, you've turned them into positives and you've built great team, you've got incredible investors, you've won plenty of awards along the way. So of all of those many achievements, what's been your personal highlight and why?
I think anything that revolves around the team stuff is gives me, and it's not even a particular achievement. It's sometimes when you've seen a hired employee that we hired maybe as a driver and now is like leading a team, and knowing that you've had that impact or created that, I think those are the biggest times in my career where I felt a sense of achievement and pride and proud of what we've done. A lot of the personal stuff is cool, but really nothing really impacts me as much as those moments at Hived and seeing the team evolve and get through so many. We've put our team, we've grown incredibly fast from 2021 to now, like ridiculously fast. And that's not just because of me and my co-founder, that's because of what the Hive team have done and put into that. And so being, one of the fastest growing startups in Europe is a great sort of, I guess, seal of approval, but I see it day in, day out. I see it day in, day out, how hard the team is working. I see, we had one of our busiest days yesterday and we hit a 99% SLA on our busiest day ever. And that was like incredibly, for me, like an incredible achievement. A lot of the external world won't see those things. They just see it glorious personal words, and that's great in its own way. But it's always about what the team can achieve and delivers. And I think every time we grow massively and the team just grows, continues to grow, that for me is the biggest, I guess, achievement.
I love that. Thank you. I wanted to come on to talk about another topic that we talk about in this podcast quite a lot because it's one of the harder parts of building a business in the venture ecosystem, and that's fundraising.
Yeah.
And you have been very successful at this. You've raised a $42 million round recently to expand your AI powered parcel delivery service. So you know how to raise a lot of money from great investors, and our audience who are kind of maybe in the earlier stages of building their businesses, I'm sure would love to pick your brains. So can you share a bit more about your fundraising experience? How's that been for you? And perhaps how did you sort of approach raising a bigger round compared to the earlier ones? And any learnings you might have to pass on to our listeners would be amazing.
I think fundraising is incredibly tough. I think it's the media, you see a lot of the outlier crazy success stories of raise 100 million and took 2 weeks and things like that. But there's a lot of companies that don't have it like that. Fundraising is incredibly tough on for a lot of reasons. Mentally resilient, you have to be incredibly mentally strong. You have to be able to go through a lot of these processes and get rejected and still have the belief and continue. And opportunity cost, right? You're fundraising whilst the business is still happening, and fundraising can sometimes take from the start to actually all the legal docs, everything closing 6 months. And so that's 6 months where your focus and attention as a CEO is on funding the business as opposed to running the business. And so or you might have to do both at the same time. So it's very, very demanding. I don't think much has changed actually from raising an earlier round to a later round. I actually have found that the later rounds for me, particularly for Hive, is weirdly becoming not easier because fundraising is hard, but it sells itself. In the earlier days, you're selling a lot of founder belief, energy, conviction, and a lot of these investors just backing founders. And truthfully, me and my co-founder, first-time founders, taking on this massive logistics industry, a lot of investors looked at us like, you guys are crazy. This is a hard business. You're young, you have no experience. And probably fair. They're probably fair to think that if I was an investor in their shoes and I came to pitch, I would probably say the same thing. So I had no warm intros into the VC world, no contacts, and that's the way the world works. And so the earlier stages were probably a little bit trickier for me, simply because I didn't have the network, probably didn't have the confidence that I do have today. If I was to go start a new business and raise from the start now, I'd be a lot more confident in myself. And so I wasn't as mature as I am today. And then the later Hive just become, the metrics start to do the talking, the X amount of revenue, our margin levels, the kind of customer testimonials, all the rest of the metrics. The later you get as a business, when you start raising money, it becomes less about the founder pitch and more about the business metrics. And we've been fortunate enough where we've continued to execute at great levels. And my whole thing has been, as a leader, if we execute greatly on the business and continue to build amazing metrics in the right way, investment will happen. And that's what's happened. So yeah, weirdly, later on is becoming probably not a lot easier, but easier than the early days. And also, I've just become more experienced at fundraising. I realized I can sense when an investor probably isn't that interested or they're not going to get you there. And I'm more confident to kind of end the conversation early myself. It's like, hey, it doesn't seem like your team is that interested. Rather not waste anyone's time here. Let's call this short. And having the confidence to do that in the early days, I probably wouldn't. But now I'm very strict on time, not wasting my time with any funds that probably aren't that serious, knowing who's actually investing in our space, knowing what type of return they're looking for. Do we fit their profile? And doing a lot of that work can save you a lot of time during the process. So lots of tips and tricks I've learned along the way. And definitely one of the things that I advise to all early stage founders is your energy, how you pitch, the vision that you can convey. Investors at that point are just choosing you as founders.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you for sharing. And just to build on that, actually, the experience of working with investors once they're on the cap table. Have you got any advice for maybe founders that have raised their first round and now like head down building, how to make the most of those investors and or things to watch out for?
Yeah, we've been incredibly lucky and fortunate enough that we've got every single investor on our cap table is phenomenal. And I think that takes two ways. I think I put a lot of effort and time into these relationships to build the trust, and it comes both ways. And so I think as a founder, the main advice I can give is once you learn how to work with the investors and build that trust, and that can be incredibly powerful. And I know that I can go in. There's been so many like times where I've had to email the board the next morning after something not gone our way, and we're like, very clear, this is what's happened, this is the plan. And investors really appreciate the transparency, the honesty, and actually that you're fixing it. Investors invest in so many companies. They know, they've seen so many things don't work out. They're used to it. They know a business isn't going to be plain sailing. They just want to know that as founders and the CEO, you're stewarding the company in the best way, you're being transparent. And the little tips and tricks that you can do to build that along the way is So, some things like I make sure we maintain a quarterly board meeting, and as part of that quarterly board meeting is doing some fun, some social activity as together as investors in your team, as founders, or maybe bring a couple of C-suite members, whether that's going for dinner, whether that's going playing darts or something. Getting outside the boardroom to build those relationships in a similar way that you would with your team is just as powerful for the board. I think reputation is really, really important both ways. And if you just be very have high integrity, lead with trust, these relationships, you'll get the best out of your investors. And I'm happy and, can look back and think that every single investor we've had along the journey has been incredibly supportive, has been great with us. And that's two ways that we put in that relationship and time to make those relationships as good as they are.
Yeah, it's a really, really good piece of advice for anyone listening. It's a two-way process, and yeah, if you do take the time to build that trust, the impact investors can have can be massive. I selfishly would like to talk about a topic that I love, which is hiring and culture, given my day job. So I'd love to find out about your experience. You went into this entrepreneurial experiences, but this was like your first proper founder experience. And so there's going to be so many things you've done for the first time. And one of those is building a team. And I know firsthand how difficult it is to hire. That's why we're in business, but it's also a personal experience that ironically hiring for JBM is often the thing I find the hardest thing to do because the bar's so high and because I know all the, horror stories. So how have you found growing the team at Hived, and how has your approach to hiring evolved as the business has scaled?
Yeah, great question. I think, firstly, I always say this, but the only reason any startup, well, for me, what I think personally for Hive especially is the only way we will win in the long term if we build an incredible team. And it's all about the team and culture. And you're right, I didn't have any prior experience of leading a team or actually being in a team because I didn't really like, I had little mini jobs here and there, but never really like, I didn't work for a startup or a big company for a few years, kind of launched into it. But like I said, one thing that I did have was leading a football team. And there's a lot of similarities around that. And I think one thing that I've learned is culture and traits trump anything. And so you can have someone with the most experience, etc., but if they're not the right culture, don't have the right qualities and traits, that's not going to work at Hive. And one thing that I've learned more and more is really, really learn how to interview and really interview for those traits and those values and what motivates people, because we have that quite clearly coded now at Hived. It took a while and we probably should have done that earlier, but it's really hard to do that. In the early days, we were mainly the main things I was hiring for is, are you hungry? Are you highly motivated? Will you roll your sleeves up and get anything done? That means taking the bin? That means delivering parcels. That means pitching to a big customer. Can you do it all? Basically, and have low ego, and that's a huge thing that we've always hired for is low ego. And obviously, as Hive has scaled, now we've actually codified what does that mean, and actually in the interview process, looking more and more out for that. And then the other thing is I've learned the hard way is trusting my gut a little bit more when things aren't working out with the right people, and that's okay. And unfortunately, startups are working on a completely different timeline to a lot of other companies out there, where maybe a company will, try to make it work after a year or two with an individual. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury of time. And so often, though, when I've actually had to make those difficult decisions of, firing people or if it's not working out, is you're actually maybe doing the other person a favor as well because they're not happy. And so in being a lot more decisive on those decisions, where maybe I would have waited a lot longer initially, but you're actually helping the other person at the same time. So a lot of different things have evolved. Now we've gone through lots of different things. Me and my co-founder maintain doing a 15-minute final sign-off interview with every employee at Hive, because I think the culture there is so important that we want to keep as we scale. The team is everything. We have to constantly bring people in who raise the bar. That's one of our key, like, if this person, will it raise the bar of everyone? Are other people going to learn of this person? But ultimately, one thing that still remains is low ego, because high egos don't make it at Hived.
Yeah, love that. I think it's obviously something as you scale, it's harder to do is carve out that time to do those final interviews. But I can totally see why you want to really, one, have that connection, and two, really make sure that you're bringing in the right sorts of people. I know Hyped is quite unique in that you have lots of different types of roles within the company, from the kind of leaders that come into the company to the drivers you employ. So balancing those sorts of different experiences, skill sets, personalities must be quite challenging. So how do you ensure that that same cultural DNA runs through all the teams and that it's scalable?
Yeah, it's an incredibly huge challenge, but like I said, it's an opportunity as well, because I think that's what makes Hive incredible, because of how diverse the people or the thought is, everything is. And we've been able to take a chance on a lot of people who probably would have not fit the normal criteria for a job specs. We've got loads of case studies of people who have worked as drivers or sortation handlers or something like that, and now are, working in the team. I think I need to get the new stat, because Hive has grown so much, but up until not longer, like 20% of our full-time head office started off as a driver or sortation handler, which is incredible. But they have grit and resilience that you wouldn't find elsewhere, because they want it more, they care more, because they've done the on the ground role. So I see that challenge as an opportunity to make an incredible diverse company, and we have a huge advantage. The amount of different perspectives that we have, the amount of fun that we have, there's so many walks of life at Hived. Hived is full of amazingly talented people of all sorts. You've got ballet dancers, you've got singers, you've got musicians, you've got all sorts, and you've got from all sorts of demographics as well, and status, and people who have gone to university, people who haven't gone to university. And I think that's what makes an incredible company. And I think my challenge or opportunity is how we ensure that scales, and how we are systematic at ensuring that we're still making sure that we're getting a lot of our drivers, sortation handlers, giving them equal opportunities for these roles as well, because I think that's what's made us grow really quickly, and is part of the Hive DNA that we absolutely do not ever want to get rid of. And if you're systematic about it, I think you have no problem scaling it. You just have to be very intentional and thoughtful about it.
Yeah, it really does sound like you've created something really special, and love the diversity and that you have in the team. And what a great stat to be able to talk about, and seeing people progress into different roles or functions and giving everyone the opportunity to do that is wonderful. It's something to be really celebrated. Before we get to our wrap-up questions, I'm sure our listeners, many of whom will be working in the startup world and probably thinking, I really need to work somewhere like Hive. So what are your plans for hiring over the months ahead, and what helps make candidates really stand out to you, to give our listeners a few tips for when they're interviewing?
Yeah, so we are definitely hiring quite a few roles. Please look at our website. There are plenty there, and we will continue to do so. I've said this before, but we really do look at our values that we have at Hived: kindness, tenacity, curiosity. They're all on our website. Look at them, because that's what we over index on, and resourcefulness in our values. One thing though, I always make incredibly clear to anyone interviewing at Hived: this is not a job for everyone. It's a very fast-paced environment. We are on a big mission here. Hived has grown from 2021 to 2025, extraordinarily quickly, one of the fastest growing startups in Europe, and we're not slowing down. We have a very clear vision of where we want to go to in the next 4 or 5 years. If you're really ambitious, if you're really highly motivated, if you really want to work in a challenging environment, which could also be quite life changing for you as well, this is the place. I'm not going to deny that it's not a slow pace, I would say. So just keep that in mind, but it's incredibly fun. And I think the people at Hived are amazing. And I think it's one thing that I always say to people in interview, that when they go into an interview, it's like, they're really great people here. And I'm like, yeah. And then they're not sure if it was an interview. Then I basically do a catch up about, once a month with all the new joiners. And they always say is, the interview process where I thought everyone was nice is actually true. And so we're trying to create this blend of great people with low ego, but really motivated, want to work hard, and want to be part of something massive.
It's the ultimate combination. Before we do our final two wrap-up questions, I need to ask you what's in store for Hived. The year ahead is no doubt going to be full of exciting developments and big ambition. So do you mind telling our listeners a bit about it, and maybe just also how you envisage the kind of broader industry evolving in the year ahead?
Yeah, great question. So we have done an exceptional job this year of more than doubling our revenue this year, which is a huge, huge, huge achievement. And we're on tracking to doing more of that next year. And so The next year for us, we've just expanded into 8 cities. And next year is just continuing to grow our client base and delivering superb results for our customers. We are on that path to UK expansion pretty soon. So the next 4 or 5 years for us is really clear. We want to be the UK leader in this space. We've done a lot of the hard work in the past 4 years to build an incredible technology platform, build a robust set of clients, build a great team, build a platform for now to really launch into. So the next few years is really hyper growthing off the network, off the platform that we've built, which is extremely exciting. And our vision and mission is to be the number one delivery company in the UK. And we're very firmly on track for that.
Wow, what a great ambition. And we wish you nothing but the best of luck to achieve that goal. I think it's good for all of us if this happens in terms of a better experience. And
Yes.
great to see like a startup with such ambitions and heading in that direction. We're sadly at an end. It's been an absolute joy and a privilege and a super enjoyable chat. But I have got two final questions. One is, this is 40-Minute Mentor. So I have to ask you, if you could be mentored by anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
One would probably, I mean, still alive. I'm not sure if he's doing any mentoring. I'm not sure, but Jeff Bezos. I think Amazon is an absolute phenomenal company of what they've built. And I think they pioneered organizational design. And I think they did a phenomenal job of that. Like you said, all learnings that we would, filter and apply to Hived. But I think what they've managed to achieve is absolutely remarkable. And then secondly is the legend Sir Alex Ferguson. Even though I played for Man City, I'm a big Manchester United fan. And I think if you look back at how Manchester United dominated so much, and he was an incredible leader, and clearly he's mastered something about leading a team and building that highly motivated teamwork culture.
No, I mean the ultimate mentoring duo there. I thought you were going to say Pep Guardiola, so I am shocked that you're a United fan. But what an era! I mean, the greatest ever, Sir Alex Ferguson, and I can see why you picked two such successful people to be your mentors. Final question, Murvah. What is the last piece of career advice that you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Don't be afraid of failing. Hive might look super successful. You might see all these things about me, but I've failed so many times, and failure has taught me so much. So never be afraid of failing. And if you're not uncomfortable enough in your day to day, then you're not challenging yourself hard enough.
Very well said. Thank you so much, Murvah. What an enjoyable chat. So much great mentorship there, like bags of ambition, such a mission driven business that you're building. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your story with us all.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I really hope that you found it useful and inspiring. If we have left any questions unanswered, or if you have any feedback or guest recommendations for future series, then please make sure you get in touch on info@jbmc.co.uk. I often get asked by listeners how you can help us spread the word about 40-Minute Mentor. There are two simple ways you can help. Firstly, share this episode on your preferred social media platform, and LinkedIn is probably where I'm most likely to see it. And you can also leave us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Every share on social media and review left on the podcast platforms really helps us to get 40-Minute Mentor in front of new audiences and share the power of mentorship even further. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for even more pocket-sized mentorship.